Throughout 30 years, Guatemala became the home of anarchy and impunity. Human rights are violated daily and at concerning rates, with no justice. The army, along with other sectors of real power, interpreted and adopted the National Security Doctrine, DSN, to the point where they did not even attempt to adapt it to the prevailing situation in Guatemala. The DSN maintained that the society's security was guaranteed by that of the state, and included the concept of the internal enemy. In addition to guerrillas, an internal enemy could be any person, group, or national institution that opposed the military government's ideology, and was considered a main threat. From this principle surged growing numbers of desaparecidos and extrajudicial assassinations, and only few, like Myrna Mack, had the courage to defy the system and search for justice. The army came to Mahachel. 2 or 3 months later came the helicopters and then the air. There was a lot of suffering in the mountains. We were farmers and we planted our crops, but the patrols came to destroy them. The army came and told us to give ourselves up. We didn't want to, but then the bombing started. We kept a burning piece of wood under the ashes so that it wouldn't smoke. The army is constantly bombing the population there. We were making our luggage to go hide, but the patrols and the army came. There were around 200 patrols. Shooting began. They came into town and surrounded the houses. They captured 8 families. When we were captured, the patrol came, and there were also some combatants from the guerrilla who started to shoot. We suffered. There was hardly anything to eat. We ate grass. We managed to have a tall corn plantation, but the army came and burned it all, and we had to run again. As the co-founder and coordinator of the Association for the Advance in Social Science in Guatemala, Avansco, Myrna Elizabeth Mack Cheng was one of the first researchers who traveled to isolated villages affected by the armed conflict, like the Ixil Triangle. On September 11, 1990, Myrna Mack was brutally stabbed to death as she was leaving her office. Realizing that nothing was being done to achieve justice for her sister's death, Helen Mack needed a leader willing to confront such a demanding and controversial affair, and that is who she became. She brought forth a vision that motivated others and took on the fight against impunity in Guatemala. We do not want violence, hatred, or revenge. We want to ensure justice that guarantees the end of the arbitrariness and impunity. With the help from the Attorney General's office, Helen Mack took the Myrna Mack case to court with the objective of condemning both the material and intellectual authors of her sister's assassination. On September 29th, the Criminological Research Department of the National Police had concluded the first report on the crime under the command of José Mérida Escobar and Julio César Pérez Ixcajo. In this report, Mérida and Pérez had identified Noel de Jesús Beteta Álvarez, a former specialty sergeant who worked for the Presidential Security Department at the time of the crime, as one of the main suspects responsible for the death of Myrna Mack. As one of the anthropologist's colleagues, I recognized Beteta as one of the men who were in a waiting attitude on September 11, 1990, outside the Avansco offices. I saw an individual of an anatomy resembling that of Beteta carry through the assassination. By 1991, despite the evidence, testimonies, and pleas for justice, nothing had been done about the Myrna Mack case. Several national and international organizations demanded clarification on Myrna Mack's killing from the Guatemalan government. After more than 3 months of the assassination of Myrna Mack, the Guatemalan government has not performed any investigation on this ruthless crime committed against a defenseless woman. We demand the competent authorities of Guatemala to investigate and clarify this crime completely, punishing those directly and indirectly responsible in accordance to the national judicial system. Political pressure quickly rose, and on July 4, 1991, the Attorney General's office ordered the arrest of Beteta. The Attorney General, Acisclo Valladares, said, "Justice must not see ranks or uniforms or powers of any kind. It must be applied without discrimination because peace will only be achieved under a state of rights in which justice is properly carried out." As the search for Beteta continued, the case's investigations faced complications. The court had called in the 2 crime investigators, Mérida and Pérez, due to a second report on the crime that had been released about a month after the original. Unlike the first, the second report stated that the motive of the crime was robbery rather than political. Pérez confirmed the second report, but Mérida denied it and confirmed the original. As Mérida left the court, he said, "Today, I have signed my death sentence." Effectively, 9 days later, he was extrajudicially executed. Still, Helen Mack was determined and focused on defeating impunity. Shortly after Mérida's death, Beteta was found in Los Angeles, where he had fled less than a month after the assassination of Myrna Mack, and was brought back to Guatemala on December 4, 1991. "I did not kill her. I had never heard of her. I did not know her." Dr. Tomushat, who claims to be an expert in human rights, came here to practically leave in place that I should be condemned. The evidence against the defendant is composed of supposition. There is no direct evidence that incriminates him. Beteta maintained his innocence throughout the trial, and Helen Mack's attempts to obtain justice were continuously hindered. Witnesses and judges received anonymous threats, causing many of them to later recant for fear of retribution. Many were attacked, and 11 different judges came to know the Myrna Mack case, which is not normal within a judicial process. Regardless of the many unfavorable events, Helen Mack's leadership was evident through her effective decision-making and persistence. Jesus Beteta Alvarez's behavior makes his actions suspicious, and with the evidence, he is convicted and sentenced to 25 years in incommutable prison for being responsible for the action. In February 1993, Helen Mack obtained justice from her sister's material killer. The conviction of Noel de Jesus Beteta Alvarez was only the first step towards the truth, but from there began the revealing of the participation of other individuals involved in the assassination. She continued to search for justice from Beteta's chiefs, Colonels Guillermo Oliva Carrera and Juan Valencia Osorio, and General Edgar Augusto Godoy Gaetan, whom she considered the intellectual authors of her sister's murder. The president at the time, Jorge Serrano Elias, said he supported Helen Mack's requests, but did not see any valid evidence against Beteta's chiefs. My government will not lend itself to prosecute innocent persons accused because of revanchist attitudes, but it will not cover up those truly responsible either. It was not until September of 2002, 12 years after Myrna Mack was killed, that a trial was opened against Oliva, Valencia, and Godoy. The Myrna Mack case was the first case for intellectual murder in Guatemala, and the first to take senior officers to trial for a crime committed during the armed conflict. On October 3, 2002, Valencia was condemned to 30 years in prison, and Oliva and Godoy were absolved. Regardless of the acquittal of Godoy and Oliva, the sentencing of Colonel Valencia and the fact that we attended a trial such as the one held on September 3 to October 3, 2002, reaffirms my belief that it is possible to see justice in Guatemala even if it means a sustained struggle for 12 or more years. Less than a year later, Valencia appealed and was absolved and released. Though he was later reconvicted, he escaped and is now a fugitive. Organizations around the world were outraged and considered this series of events a serious setback for justice. Simply having access to the jurisdictional organisms is not enough. We want the access to that justice to have a broad and comprehensive concept. Almost immediately, Helen Mack's legacy became evident nationally and internationally. With this, an excellent opportunity is open for the impunity in the country to come to an end. Helen has become a symbol of the struggle against impunity in Guatemala. Many Guatemalans now have the faith to challenge the impunity of perpetrators of political crimes and admire Helen for her brave and persistent efforts to promote justice and human rights. Although the Myrna Mack case had been concluded, it was not the end of Helen Mack's leadership in the fight against impunity. She continued to promote the pursuit for justice in the country through the Myrna Mack Foundation, which she had created and directed since 1993 to drive the consolidation of peace and democracy. A group of family members who had unsuccessfully attempted to obtain justice for 26 crimes obtained in the military log, a military record found in 1999, came to the Myrna Mack Foundation with the hope of ending impunity in those cases. In November of 2005, they filed a complaint before the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights that was later backed by the state of Guatemala in 2006. It was not until 2011 that the case was presented to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights.
El diario militar son 183 desapariciones, pero que también en esta lucha contra la impunidad hemos ido avanzando. Yo esperaría que en este mes de septiembre, octubre, podamos tener la sentencia ya de la Corte Interamericana.
On December 21, 2012, the state of Guatemala was sentenced for the crimes described in the military logs. Helen Mack made history with admirable courage, persistence, and leadership. Myrna Mack's case was not an extraordinary one, but together the Mack sisters have had a profound impact on Guatemalans' government and judicial system. Their ongoing legacy is apparent through the significant change in the legal atmosphere. They filled their countrymen with hope, bravery, and determination, and brought them closer to a just Guatemala. Regardless of political affiliation, Helen Mack became an admirable and exemplary leader through the Myrna Mack case, and she continues to extend her already solidified legacy.